Hi guys, so Boris Johnson during PMQs on Wednesday was asked a question by a member of the DUP, Ian Paisley Jr., who's a Brexiteer, we must remember, about the Northern Ireland Protocol, and Boris Johnson responded in an absolutely bizarre way. So let's hear what he had to say.
Into Northern Ireland with Ian Paisley. Ian Paisley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and may I too express condolences to the family of Captain Sir Tom Moore, an inspirational and wonderful gentleman. Prime Minister, you say that your commitment to Northern Ireland is unshakable. Well, I speak for all of my constituents today when I tell you that the protocol has betrayed us and has made us feel like foreigners in our own country.
Now, it's not the protocol that's the problem, it's Brexit that's the problem. Brexit had created this issue, not the protocol, because there were two options. There was an option of having a border in the island of Ireland, which would have created problems with the Good Friday Agreement, or there was an option of having a border in the Irish Sea, which didn't affect the Good Friday Agreement. Or there was another option. There was an option of having the UK, Great Britain and Northern Ireland part of the customs union and the single market. But Ian Paisley didn't want that. Boris Johnson didn't want that. And now we're seeing the consequences of that.
Tea and sympathy will not cut the mustard. So what is the Prime Minister actually going to do when the Prime Minister realises that the EU will do nothing to help Northern Ireland?
It's not the EU's fault. The EU said if you leave the customs union and the single market, this is the consequence. Ian Paisley responded by saying that's Project Fear, that's scaremongering by the EU. We shouldn't listen to what the EU has to say. We must respect Brexit. He banged on about Brexit. He voted for Brexit, he campaigned for Brexit, and he supported Brexit every step of the way. So he can't complain now about the protocol. The protocol is part of Brexit, part of the withdrawal agreement. But if Brexit didn't happen, we wouldn't be facing these problems. But even if Brexit did happen, if the UK had stayed within the customs union and the single market, we wouldn't be seeing these problems. So Ian Paisley can't really complain.
Will the Prime Minister use all of the instruments at his disposal? Will he use, if necessary, his parliamentary majority? Will he legislate, if necessary, to remove the impediments to trade in Northern Ireland? And will he be a man of his word and allow businessmen in my constituency to bin the unnecessary documentation that he told us we could bin? Prime Minister.
So this is actually interesting because Boris Johnson went to Northern Ireland before the end of the transition period and said, if anyone asks you to fill out a document, you call me up and I'll tell them where to put it in the bin. Of course, that was a lie. Everyone had a bit of a laugh about it. And now businesses have to fill out this paperwork.
Minister, be the unionist we need you to be.
I utterly share the frustration of the honourable gentleman about the way the EU, in particular, the EU Commission, temporarily seem to call for you to use the protocol in such a way as to impose a border contrary to the spirit of the Good Friday Agreement.
So Boris Johnson is saying here, how dare the EU, which it didn't do, but how dare the EU attempt to invoke Article 16 of the Northern Ireland Protocol to undermine the Good Friday Agreement. So this is what Boris Johnson is saying here. Now listen carefully. He's saying, how dare the EU contemplate invoking Article 16? Let's hear what else Boris Johnson had to say.
The letter of the Good Friday Agreement, and we will do everything we need to do, Mr. Speaker, whether legislatively or indeed by invoking Article 16 of the Protocol.
So Boris Johnson has just criticised a number of seconds ago the European Union for invoking Article 16, which it did not, but there was the possibility it was going to do that. It was considering it. It didn't do it, remember. Boris Johnson has just criticised the European Union for doing something that he's saying that he's willing to do. This is absolutely bizarre. Boris Johnson criticising someone else for not doing something, but threatening to do something or suggesting that they were going to do it. And in the very next breath, he said, I'm going to do the same thing.
Mr. Speaker, to ensure that there is no barrier down the Irish Sea, and the honourable gentleman's business constituents, some of whom I know very well and admire very much, can continue to do business unfettered between Northern Ireland and the rest of this country.
Once again, Boris Johnson, unfettered trade, that there won't be a border down the Irish Sea. There is a border down the Irish Sea, Boris. It's really, I had to actually look at I had to double check the date on this video, when this was recorded. This was recorded on the 3rd of February 2021, not 2020, not 2019, this year, this week. This is unbelievable. Boris Johnson saying there isn't a border down the Irish Sea when there is a border down the Irish Sea. It's not there will not be a border down the Irish Sea. He's saying that there isn't one now when there is one now. This is absolute insanity. What the hell is he on? First of all, him saying that the EU should not consider even invoking Article 16 because it would undermine the Good Friday Agreement. And then in the very next breath, he says, yeah, I'm considering invoking Article 16, which would undermine the Good Friday Agreement. And then he goes on to say that there's no border in the Irish Sea, when there is a border in the Irish Sea. That's what Ian Paisley is complaining about. How can Ian Paisley be complaining about something that doesn't exist? Yes, I know the DUP are insane, but they're right on this in the sense that that there is a border in the Irish Sea, and it's slowing down trade. It's creating problems. Now the EU, of course, Boris Johnson and Ian Paisley are blaming the EU here, but this is not the EU's fault. The EU gave the UK the option to stay within the customs union and the single market, and Boris Johnson and the Brexiteers and Ian Paisley said no. The European Union said if you leave that, there are going to be checks, there's going to be delays, there are going to be problems. And the response, of course, was Project Fear, scaremongering, stop saying this, we want our sovereignty, we want our freedom, we want all of these things. They completely ignored the warnings. And it's not just from the European Union. Many people were saying these are going to be the consequences. And Boris Johnson responding, it's unbelievable his response here. Responding by saying, we're going to invoke Article 16, the thing that Brexiteers, the Tories, the entire government has been criticising the EU for since Friday last week. And now Boris Johnson said, I'm going to invoke it. And what do we hear in response in the media? Nothing. Boris Johnson is claiming he's going to do exactly the same thing as he's complaining the European Union did, which it didn't do. And in the media, we hear nothing. How is this possible? Now, the DUP want Boris Johnson to do something. Well, Boris Johnson can't really do anything. There is, at the moment, the idea that Michael Gove has asked for an extension to the grace period. Not the transition period, but the grace period. So, at the moment, certain things are not in place. Because and there is a disaster, so the British government are going to go back to the EU, the ones that they said we need to take back control from, the ones that that they said that we need to have our sovereignty from. They're going back to the EU to ask, not demand, but to ask for an extension to the grace period. And of course, it's packaged up as, it's to protect peace in Northern Ireland, it's to protect the Good Friday Agreement, is to protect all of these things. The European Union, Remainers, member states of the European Union said, if you leave the single market and the customs union, you're going to create these problems. And of course, the response from Brexiteers was, no, it's not. It's going to be perfectly fine. There may be a few bumps in the road, But anyone who's suggesting there would be serious problems in Northern Ireland is engaging in Project Fear. This response from Boris Johnson is absolutely ridiculous. Let me know in the comments section, guys, what you think. As always, your comments are greatly appreciated. Thanks a lot. I want to say a big thank you to all of my patrons. You ensure that this channel continues to exist. I'm eternally grateful for all of your support. If you join Patreon, you will receive instant access to our Discord server, where we have both audio and video chats. You can chat with me and other patrons, where we discuss important and non-important issues. Becoming a patron per month costs about the same as a large coffee, so why not check it out?